Welcome to Real Judaism with Rabbi Ari Klapper. Unfiltered wisdom for Jewish life.
Okay, Be'ezus Hashem. We're continuing now with our Avodas Hashem, Shmiras Einayim. We're in Elul. And in Elul, we have special Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. Ani L'Doidi V'Doidi Li. Kodesh Baruch Hu loves us. So sometimes it might feel a little bit tough because this is a very tough nisayon. It's a very, very difficult nisayon. When we're talking about Shmiras Einayim, we're not only talking about Shmiras Einayim. We're talking about all the things that are around Shmiras Einayim also, right? If a person didn't have a taiva, then Shmiras Einayim wouldn't be an issue, right? If a person wasn't the way HaKadosh Baruch Hu created us, so then I wouldn't have these issues. If I didn't have the male hormones, this wouldn't be a problem, right? But HaKadosh Baruch Hu did create us this way. And He created us this way for a reason. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves us. And He understands the nisayon. And He understands that it's difficult. And He says every single person has the ability to overcome. Every person has the ability to overcome. Now, there are a lot of things that we're going to learn. Chizuk. There's going to be different ideas. We're talking about keeping away from things. We have to understand there's a tachlis here. The tachlis is great. I'll just tell you a little bit about my trip. I was in America about a week ago. I was there for a week. So 2 weeks ago, I left to America. And I was there for a week. And it's a big culture shock when you go from Eretz Yisrael to America, especially when you come from a community that's more sensitive to tznius. Just getting on the plane, just being in the airport is already like, wow, a different world. Well, so when I was in America, on the one hand, I was in yeshiva, and I was around the Rabbonim, and I had more time, to make a kesher with them and to speak with them, and I got a lot of chizuk. And on the other hand, there was a lot of pritus. There's a lot of pritus. And the truth of the matter is that's the world that we're in. The world that we're in today is a world where they just will do whatever they want. And it's gotten to such a point that the most crazy, extreme things are happening in the world. Mom is really, really crazy. So what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to deal with this? You know how we're supposed to deal with it? The first thing we need to do is we need to try to stay away as much as we possibly can. Because this is a natural taiva. It's a natural thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu built into us for a reason. We have to keep it focused on that reason. This is something that potentially can produce a lot of pleasure. However, as we've discussed many times in the past, there are different types of pleasure. There are different levels of pleasure. And since there are different types and different levels of pleasure, so then we need to focus and make sure that we're getting not the cheap stuff, not the garbage stuff. We're getting the top level stuff. The problem is the cheap stuff is cheap. You can get it easy, but it's fake. We have to realize that all of these things that are happening in the world are fake. Unfortunately, many of us have been exposed. We've seen certain things, and we can't take it back. But okay, now that it's happened already, what can we do at least to take advantage of that as best as we can to now beat it? Sometimes the best way to beat your enemy is by knowing your enemy. Obviously, it would be better if we weren't exposed in the first place, that's for sure. And therefore, a person listening to this or watching this should not say, well, maybe it's better to be exposed in order to do this. That is just not true. That is not true. Maybe we'll come back to that point a little bit later. That's certainly not true. But now that we have been exposed to it, what can we say about it in order to beat it? One thing we can say about it is we can understand how fake it is. When these things come up on screens or even in person, and you see certain things, is that reality or is it not reality? I'll tell you, I saw a lot of things when I was in America, and I saw people interacting with each other. And unfortunately, I passed by places where there's screens. It's very hard not to. Just when you're sitting in the airport waiting to get on the plane, they're everywhere. And you see things that are just so not real, but yet you can feel, if you're paying attention, you can feel, wait a second, how could it be that at the same time I'm disgusted by something, but I want to see it anyway? How does that happen? How does it make sense? You can only realize that if you're watching from the outside. How are both feelings happening at the same time? That's the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov fighting inside of you. On the one, you're saying, I don't want this. On the other hand, you're saying, I do want this. Your body says, I want it. And your soul says, I don't want it. So who's going to win? Well, that's our Bechira. That's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. And that's how we're going to get schar in this world and the next world. By choosing the right thing, even when it's hard. We have to realize that beforehand, before we get to that point, not to put ourselves into that nisayon. Because I know that's the struggle I'm going to feel when I'm there, as much as a person can. A person will always have nisyonis, right? Unless a person's blind, so then they'll have nisyonis. I'll just make that point. It's very interesting. I think in the previous year I mentioned this, but it's kedai to hear it again. It's mamish ad kedei kach, how far you saw that the great people would go in order to protect themselves from an nisayon. There's a medrash. I definitely mentioned it in the past, but it's kedai to hear it again. There's a medrash that says that there was a great Tana named Reb Zachariah ben Cherish. The Tana, Reb Zachariah ben Cherish, said that, I'm sorry, not he said. He was a great Tana. And the Satan came to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he asked Ramasya ben Cherish. I say Zachariah ben Cherish, it's Ramasya ben Cherish. And the Satan asked HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Ramasya ben Cherish, what is he? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, he's a tzaddik gomor. He said he's a tzaddik gomor. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, he's a tzaddik gomor. So the Satan said, oh really? I bet you I can get him to sin. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, no, you can't. So the Satan said, you let me try to sin. So the Satan said, you let me try? And the HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, yeah, I'll let you try. So the Medrash says the Satan dressed himself up as the most beautiful woman since Maisa Bereshis to step foot on the planet. And the Satan dressed himself up as this woman and stood right in front of Ramasya ben Cherish. So what did Ramasya ben Cherish do? He was learning, and there was this woman right in front of him. Whoa, okay. Picks his chair up and turns around. So what does the Satan do? Also comes around. So they played like musical chairs. He kept turning himself around. She didn't get the point, obviously. Hello, lady, get lost. She didn't get the point. Of course not. She was a Satan, but he didn't know that. So what did he do? There's such a thing called hot pokers. A hot poker is when you have a fireplace. You're making a fire and you want to stoke the coals in order to keep the fire going. So took these hot pokers and he gouged his own eyes out. Can you imagine? He took his own eyes out so he wouldn't sin. It says the Satan fainted. The Satan fainted. Believe that? But to the end of the Medrash, which is really amazing. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, after this mice, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent the Malach Refoel to go heal Ramasya ben Cherish. But he's blind already. And he's sitting, wherever he's sitting. Maybe he's learning Baal Peh. And somebody's there. Who's there? Who is it? He says, I'm the Malach Refoel. Yes, what can I do for you? He says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent me to heal you. Not interested. Thank you very much. Not interested. Malach Refoel doesn't know what to do. So he goes back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And he said, he's not interested. So the Malach Refoel, so HaKadosh Baruch Hu said back to the Malach Refoel, go back to him and tell him that I want him to be healed. I want you to be healed. And don't worry, I'll guarantee that you won't sin. He'd rather not have eyes than to sin. Now, obviously, we're not on this level. We're not on this level. This is a tremendous nisayon. We have to realize that we have a tremendous koyach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu didn't do this for no reason. We have a tremendous koyach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu specifically built into a man this koyach because he's meant to build a family. And he needs this koyach to build a family, to make a strong kesher with his wife. in order to bring Klal Yisrael out. That's HaKadosh Baruch Hu Dafka wants that. But because of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us also this tremendous nisayon. So what are we supposed to do? So like we said, the first thing we need to do is we need to do our best to keep away from the nisayon. It's a very hard thing to do. I'm not saying it's a hard thing to do because it's so rampant. So person has to take first his own hand, in his own hands. What can I do on my own? What can I decide to do on my own? Now, this is also already a difficult nisayon, because sometimes we find out too late. Sometimes the mistakes of our youth have already become ingrained in us. Right? Somebody who starts smoking when they're 15 years old, so it's going to be very hard to quit when they get to a certain age and they realize this is really not good for them. Now, why did you start when you're 15? You started when you're 15 because you didn't know any better. And you had a bad influence and somebody gave it to you and you thought it was cool and you thought this and you thought that. So you were a stupid kid and you did something wrong and you thought you were so smart, but you weren't. Well, it's too late now. Now what are we supposed to do? So yes, it would be much better if you never would have started smoking in the first place. Much better. But now that we have that in our hands, or let's say the opposite, let's not the opposite, let's make it more nogea to what we're talking about. Somebody who already was not careful with Shmiras Einayim. Somebody who already, the difficulties of Shmiras Einayim were already put into a person because of the mistakes that he made when he was younger. Well, now what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to deal with this now? It's a very hard avodah, but it's not impossible. Person does not have to give up. We need to make a full commitment, first of all. That's the first thing. I'm committed. I saw a very beautiful idea about tshuva from Shlomo Hoffman, quoting from Yisrael Salanta. The idea of tshuva is not that you have to be finished in one shot. I am a tshuva gemura. I'm done. I did everything. The first step of tshuva is understanding I'm not perfect and I did make mistakes. If a person doesn't acknowledge that, if a person doesn't recognize first, hey, I need help, then they're very, very far from tshuva. And that's already a very, very big reason why a person might get punished. Because the first thing you need to know is, hey, you are making a big mistake. You have to know you're making a mistake. Chazal tell us in Parshas Bahar. Parshas Bahar talks about certain mitzvahs, and I believe it's a Gemara in Kiddushin, or Gittin, that talks about what the hemshich of these mitzvahs are. Why is one mitzvah brought after another, after another, and after another? The first mitzvah in Parshas Bahar is the mitzvah of Shemitah. And after that, it starts talking about other mitzvahs, like buying and selling your land, or borrowing money with interest, ribis, or selling yourself as an eved. And Chazal tell us, why are these mitzvahs all in this order? Because it's coming to tell you about a person who made a mistake the first time, and he didn't keep Shemitah properly. And because he didn't keep Shemitah properly, he ended up losing his land. He thought he was going to make money because he didn't keep Shemitah, and he ended up losing money. And because of that, he had to sell his house. He had to sell his land. He had to borrow with interest. He had to sell himself as a slave. All these things are happening to him. It's getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Why is it getting worse? It's getting worse because he didn't recognize he's making a mistake. He doesn't realize he has to fix something. So do you know what HaKadosh Baruch Hu does? He gives him another difficulty, an even more difficult thing. So that's what happens when a person doesn't realize the mistake that I'm making. The first thing we have to do is we have to realize there is a problem over here. That doesn't mean that you have to fix the problem in that 1 second. You don't. You're an oiset shuva. You're oisin shuva. You are doing shuva. You are in the active doing. Have you done shuva? Have you done it in the past? Have you finished? No, I haven't finished. I haven't finished doing shuva. It's a long way to go. This is something very serious. If it was so easy to do shuva just like that, well then yes, everyone would be expected to do it in a second. But it's not easy. It's not easy. The first thing we need to do is we need to acknowledge I need to be on a different path. The path might be a very, very long. It might be a long derech, but I need to get on that derech. But it's so long. Who knows when I'll ever get to the end? If you're not on that derech, you're much worse off. Once you get on the derech, you're already doing tshuva. You're already doing tshuva. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to look at you completely differently. And a person who's really interested, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will help him. Not just that you're doing the right thing. Hashem will actively come out and help you. But we have to be committed. You see, a person can do it a little bit at a time. You can. And it doesn't mean there aren't going to be falls along the way. It doesn't mean everything is going to go glot. It doesn't mean you're going to have you're going to see what I fell again. Falling again is part of the process. All that success that you had, yeah, you get right back up and you keep going and know that falling is part of the process. It is. Falling is part of the process. It is a normal part of the process. That is what happens. A person needs to understand that because it's very, very easy for a person to get down and to give up. And I worked so hard. I've heard it from a lot of people. I've heard from a lot of people that who were doing so great. I was doing so well, and then boom, then I fell. And now I gave up. Why'd you give up? Why'd you give up? You're doing great. And that's part of the process. You know what it's like? It's like a guy who's digging for buried treasure. And he was told this is the spot where the buried treasure is. And he's digging. He's digging for buried treasure. And he digs and he digs and he digs. And then all of a sudden, boom, he hit something really hard. Really, really hard. Yeah? He hit something very, very hard. So when he hits something very hard, he tries to hit it again and again and again. And you know what happens? It doesn't budge. So he gives up. Because I can't. Do you know what he hit? He got to the treasure. He gave up. That was the treasure itself. It was so hard. I give up. I can't dig anymore. You missed the whole point. Sometimes it's that fall. That's where you're hitting. You are right there at the end. You don't realize this is it. You've gotten there and you have a fall. It's too hard, but you're doing so great. Your mom is at the end, but you get one down and that's it. You're ready to throw the whole thing away. That's terrible. That's the Yetzer Hara fooling you into thinking that you're a failure when really you're a success. Falling even more than once is normal. It's a normal thing. As long as I get back up and I keep trying and I don't let myself get down about it, that is all that matters. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants you to keep fighting and you're going to see success. And even if you fall here and there, yeah, people can see success for years and then fall. And what do? Do they get down and that's it? I heard a great mashal many years ago. I think it was from a person named Rav Asher Bailinson. I think that was who told this mashal. He said about a guy who was late for his plane. And he's running to the gate. And they're going to be closing the gate in 5 minutes. And he needs to get there. And he's running. And then somebody dropped some shampoo. And it spilled all over the floor. And he doesn't see it. And he runs and whoop, slips backwards, falls right back on his back, flat on his back, staring straight up. Does he say, it's a sign from God, I should just stay here? I'm just going to stay here. Or does he get back up and keep running? You don't just stay there because you slip and fall. You get back up. Don't give up. You can still make it. Why? No, I slipped, I fell. I'm just going to stay here. That's very silly. Obviously, nobody would do that. Well, why should you do it when it's your race of your life too? That's what we're doing. We're working hard. This is something that because of the sensitivity to it. So a lot of people don't like to talk about it. People don't want to talk about it. Some people ignore it completely. Some places, like some people, it's like those pages in Shulchan Aruch have been cut out, like they don't exist, right? Tzarech la'archik min hanoshim ma'oid ma'oid, it says in Shulchan Aruch. There was a bacher a bunch of years ago who asked me, "Rabbi, what's wrong with having a girlfriend? What's wrong with it?" And I said, "Pashtus, what? Yeah, one issue is money, right? The other issue is," I said, "well, you're not supposed to." He's like, "Does it say it anywhere in Shulchan Aruch?" I said, "Yes, it does actually." So He said, can you show it to me? I said, sure, let's open up the Shulchan Aruch and let's look at it together, right? We have to realize this is something very serious. This is not just a nice hanhaga for the rest of your life. For sure it can damage you. The Torah world specifically set up their lives in a way so we can minimize this challenge. Boys and girls don't go to school together. There's a Beis Yaakov and there's a Talmud Torah. There are two different things. Boys and girls, maybe from the age of 3, sometimes maybe it's a little bit older than 3, let's say 4 or 5, boys play with the boys and the girls play with the girls. And that's the way it is. Until the point where they're supposed to get married. Because why put that nisayon right in front of me? Why do that? It makes... What? What do you mean? People didn't grow up separately. They don't even know that there's such an option. They don't even know. It's unfortunate because there's a lot of anxiety that comes from this stuff. You think a person, the goyim, are better off because of this? They're not. They're not better off. You think they don't have the halachas and they don't have to worry about all these things. It's much better for them. It's not better for them. It's not. All of these things that society is throwing at, the Western world is throwing at people, is making them not normal. It's making these people not normal. You think all these, you have to have videos of gender issues and you have to know all these things. You think that's making people better? It's not making them better. Making them more confused, making them more anxious, making them not understand who they are. Instead of focusing on really building yourself up, they want you to know that, by the way, if you want, you can be a man, a woman, a monkey, or a turtle. You can be whatever you want if you really wanted to. Yeah. Or you could be all of them, all in one, right? And it just gets people confused. That's all it does. The more we separate ourselves and focus on who we are and building ourselves up as a person, then we can take those tools that are inside of us and use them the right way. Now, it doesn't mean that it's perfect, because obviously you're going to see girls on the street. Everybody's going to be, to a certain degree, exposed in one way or another. Even if you live in the most closed place in the world, eventually you will end up seeing something. There's a story that they say. I don't remember who I heard this story from, but it brings out this point. There was once this couple that they had one son, and they wanted to keep their son pure, mamish pure. He never saw a girl in his life except for her mother, and his mother, she never, not one hair on her head was ever seen. Right? He didn't know what a girl was till he was 12 years old. Back in the shtetl, maybe they had this. I don't even know if it's a true story, but yeah. So, and then this boy got sick, and they had to take him to a doctor. But they were scared. What are we going to do? Take him to a doctor? So they brought the carriage right up to the door so they could see if anybody's coming. Quickly get him in the carriage. Yeah. So that, and there were blinders, curtains on the sides. You couldn't see anything. And it worked. And they got him into the carriage, and they're going, and they're on the way. And then the carriage hit a bump, a rock or something, and it bumped. And the curtain opened a little bit. And he was able to see out the window for just a second before the parents closed it. But he saw out for a second, and he saw a girl. And he didn't know what it was. He said, "Mommy, what is that? What was that I just saw?" So he said, "That? Oh, that's a goose. That's a goose." So he said, "Oh, Mommy, can you buy me a goose like that? I want a goose like that." We're all going to have nisyonos. Everybody's going to have a nisyon once. It's natural. It's normal. The question is, are we bringing it on ourselves or not? And what am I doing after I have the nisyon? What am I doing? We have to realize there's a big fantasy world out there. There's a lot of fakeness. There is some reality, but most of it is fake. The reality is what we're going to be going after. So in order to really get that reality and have a real quality reality, we have to realize the only way we could do that is by following the derech of the Torah. If we follow the derech of the Torah, then we will be successful, and we will be happy, and we'll be satisfied. We'll have our sipuk. We'll have hana. We'll have all the good things in life. You will not miss out. It's so unfortunate that a person will look at Judaism as a burden. It's so hard. We have so many rules. It's so difficult. When really, this is the blueprint for the world. You want to know how to use the best to get the most out of the world? This is how you do it. It's the best opportunity. That's what we have to do more than anything else. Follow the Torah. If we follow the Torah, we'll get everything. We'll be the happiest people, the most simchadik. So the more we do that, the more successful we'll be, the more happy we'll be. This is something that is not simple. But if we're committed to it, we're going to do great. Understand that there's a lot of difficulties, a lot of nisyonos. And when we overcome it, we'll have tremendous success. Now, I want to mention one last thing. It's already a little bit late, but I want to mention one last thing. We have to realize that because the Torah gives rules for these things and gives a mahalach for these things, it's not a dirty thing. This is something else that the Goyish world has put into society, and unfortunately, to a certain degree, has affected young people or even older people to think that this is something that's dirty. It's not dirty. What's the reason for this feeling of dirtiness, that we think that like it's low, it's something that's animalistic? Okay, that's part of it. But that's because they look at it as they look at it as an animalistic thing to do. Something, and you're acting like an animal. We know that this is kadosh. The mokum of bris is the mokum of tashmish. HaKadosh Baruch Hu put His sign on every Jewish man, dafka in this place, dafka in this place. So we have to understand there is kedusha over here. So when we look at ourselves, we understand ourselves. Yes, maybe this is a makom of a tremendous nisayon, but it's also a makom of tremendous opportunity for kedusha. A person shouldn't say, "Well, I'm not such a holy guy. I'm just a regular guy." Every single Jew is holy. Every single Jew has specialness. No matter how many times they've done averos, and no matter how many times it repeats itself again and again, and I keep trying it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put His sign on every single Jewish man. When we realize that we have such tremendous potential, and this is so kadosh, it should give us chizuk, not make us bring us down. It should give us chizuk. We have potential. And like I said before, as long as we realize this is something that I need to continuously work on, and I have potential to do it, then we'll be successful. Be'ez Hashem. Okay, we're going to stop here for today. Go.
Thank you for joining Real Judaism, where we explore Torah's wisdom for real life. Created by J Foundations and produced by Eli Podcast Productions. Find more episodes at realjudaism.org and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.